Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ruck, Buttercup. I'm here with Ashley and Lara. It's a girl chat, so it's just us here today. We are talking about a topic that actually kind of comes up a lot, I think, in a lot of our episodes with specifically female guests. Imposter syndrome is something that I think a lot of females specifically kind of deal with. I know that men do too, but I know that it kind of comes up a lot more often in my life, and it's mostly because of my gender that I feel like I'm an imposter in a lot of things. So we're going to kind of dig into our experiences with that and why why it's an issue.
Yeah, I was actually looking at statistics and stuff before we jumped on here, and it says that 75% of people will feel like they're an imposter at some point in their life. Which is a pretty high statistic in my opinion. I feel like we all do that, whether it's sometime in high school, sometime in college, sometime in work life, sometime in everyday life. We have that moment where we feel like we're not enough. I know I do with this. I think we've talked about this in the past. I definitely feel, especially as a military spouse, when you are thrown into jobs that you probably aren't qualified for, but you're like, I'm going to try my best and make it work. I know I've dealt with that for years and years.
Well, I think it's like when because all three of us I know for sure are entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And that is where I have felt the most. We're like, oh yeah, I can do this job. I made it up. I created this job, but I'm doing great. And then you see other people. And I think that's the worst part is not comparing yourself to you a year before, but comparing yourself to the competition. And you're like, but they're doing so good at this. And I'm just not, one of those things where it's like, oh, I could be doing so much better if I knew more, if I was better at things
Well, I definitely for me, yeah, I think for me, even in high school and stuff, I've always tried to do better. I've always been I want to be the person who's doing AP classes, even though I'm I educationally wise, I am not the smartest person. I had to work my ass off to get good grades and things like that. But I wanted to be up in that level. And I feel like that's where my whole life has been that way. I wanted to be a leader. I want to be the manager. I want to be all these things, even if I'm not fully qualified. And then when you get in those positions, then you're like, oh, I can do this. I've been doing this. But then you, like you said, you see other people and you're just like, dang, how do they do that? Because I'm doing all these things and it's not working for me. How is it working for them?
Yeah.
I know when I owned the brewery, that was a boys club.
It is. Yeah.
Hardcore. Oh, men make beer. Calm down. I won awards for mine. So, but I get asked a lot about now. Do I regret selling it? No, absolutely not. It is hard to not only own your own business, but start it from scratch. I started it in the middle of the pandemic, which was even harder because
everything
COVID laws were horrible.
Yep.
And we had to get exceptions to policies and all this stuff. And, I had to go in front of governmental agencies and be like, here's what I'm doing. And this is why you should let me. And it was just one thing after the other. And so, when it got started and I had success, it was amazing. But, health and the VA and, putting my kids as my number one priority ended up, I had somebody interested and I just grabbed the opportunity to sell it. And, it would have been nice to sell it to another female to keep it, female owned, but I sold it to a veteran. So that was nice. So at least it still lives on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Starting.
But it was definitely they would get us together as the owners of breweries and wineries and stuff in the area. I was always the only female.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing is starting a business it's definitely a male, just being a owner of a business or the founder of the nonprofit is a very male oriented area. And so I know that I had no idea what a nonprofit founder or a CEO or anything did in that. There was a lot of having to learn, but I felt like I was doing well at it. Right. But then there was I know there was a moment when I went on a radio like thing for a morning show with, at the time, the other girl who was helping me run Deployed Love it when we first started. And the guy was like, "Oh, well, look at this. 2 girls doing it. Isn't this fantastic?" And then he goes, "Well, surely you guys have some other job. This couldn't be your job." And we were just like, "Excuse me? Like, we're doing this huge thing." And you're just like, "Yeah, girls, look at these girls." And it was just like, that was like took you back down a level. Like, oh, I was doing really good. We've got it founded. Like, we've got a bunch of volunteers at all these places. And then you go in and talk to someone and we're like super excited to tell them. They're like, yeah. That was kind of
and I feel like that's something that's just like across the board. Like I've noticed our counterparts in other nonprofits who are male led, who have they just like breeze through everything. Like it's like it looks like they don't have to do anything because people want, like, I think it's just like this in their brain, like, oh, he's a leader, we want him. But like when a woman comes up and is like, hey, like they're like, oh, that's a fun hobby. And I'm just like,
exactly. That was what it was written off of. Like, it was a hobby. And luckily the girl who I was up there with, she's like, "Nah, this girl, she also does scouts. She does this. She homeschools her kid." Like, went off, was like, "No, do you understand that not only is she running this shit that she's doing now, but she's also juggling 10 other things while being the primary mother, the mom." Because at the time, that was when Dustin was deploying at least once a year. Like, that's insane. And we were just like, "How dare you write us off?" And we decided we'll never go back on your show. Like, how do you have the audacity to be like, "Yeah, please be a guest," and then be like, "Nah, I mean, you can do this on your own," right? Like, ugh.
We would have Helen farewells, and like people would come up. It was when we were just still dating, and they would come up to him and be like, "Man, your place is so awesome," and he'd be like, "No, it's hers. I'm just here. I lift the heavy things because she's the size of a child. I carry the kegs." And it's like, it was amazing. They knew who they booked through. Like, they came to me to book the event and all that other stuff. But then as soon as the event would start, they would come up and thank him and all that other stuff. And he was like, every single time they do that, I was like, because it's just like when I go to the VA, they're like, "Okay, and what's your sponsor social?" And I'm like, sponsors me. Like, did you read my ID?
It's such
I'm the veteran. Thanks.
Like, we all have these rights, but it's so, like, women are like in such a weird place for that. Because I did the field day for our homeschool group just a few weeks ago, and my husband comes to things because he's one of those dads that he wants to be there and he's at things. And so some other guy or somebody, maybe it was a wife, said something to him. I was like, "Thanks for letting your wife do this." He's like, "Do you think I let her do anything? She's gonna lead and she's gonna lead. Like, why does that?"
That is one of my like biggest pet peeves. Is like, "Thank you for letting your wife do these things." I'm like, boy, if you only knew the things that I like. And I feel like that's one of the things, like, why I like love military spouses specifically, because like I think it's we're kind of thrown into having to learn how to do things on our own, but like do multiple things. Like, between all of us here, we each work a job, we each volunteer for the nonprofit, we each have kids and do things for our kids' organizations and all these other things. And we run the household. Like, do you think our husbands would just slide into everyday life without us? Like, it would be turmoil for them. Like, they would have no freaking clue what to do with the kids. I mean, I'm sure they can figure it out. Like, I'm not saying they can't figure it out, but we are such multitaskers. Like, why is it so hard for the male population to get it in their little brains that, like, we can do more than be a wife? We can do more than be a mom. We can do those things and be successful, run businesses. And I say businesses because plural, because we can do that. Like, it's just how our brains work. We're capable of doing so much more that society doesn't, for some reason, still doesn't like wrap their head around. And it blows my mind that phrase, "Thank you for letting your wife be a part of this or putting this together or doing this," because my husband has no control of it. Like, half the time he's like, "Can you please stop doing things? Like, I need you to just don't volunteer. Please don't volunteer." And I'm like,
yeah, I feel like that's more likely is him begging me not to do things, because he's like, "We're never home. Why are we always out doing all this and the other things?"
It's funny y'all say that, because next Wednesday I'm having because last year I had my left foot basically torn all apart in all the conjoining places of your foot, and then re-put back together with metal and screws and all that happy stuff. Well, next Wednesday is my right foot. Well, this time, because it is my right foot, I can't drive, I can't do anything, because I'll have 3 pins, 2 plates, and 8 screws in my foot. So I was like, "Are you ready to be mom again?" He was like, "Ugh, no, you do too much." I was like, "Oh yeah, and remember, Astrid now has, another hole in her body that we have to be her colon."
He doesn't even have to worry about school right now because it's summer. I mean, like, like, can you imagine? Like, I feel like my whole day is just drop off, or wake up, feed, drop off, work, pick up, drop off, entertained, scouts, whatever it is. Like, it's just so consistent. Like, I had a conversation with my husband not that long ago, because like, he'll come home and take a nap, and I was like, man, it must be nice to just go to work and then come home and just take a nap. Like, he's like, well, you could do that. I was like, when can I just lay down and take a nap? Like, I don't think you realize how much work I actually do. And I think that's like, it's really hard for him to kind of like wrap his head around, because like, I work from home and I can make my schedule. So like, I can choose to not work today if I wanted to, and I go into town and just bullshit off. Like, go to Target, go to the bookstore, go have coffee, do whatever I want to do. Like, I have that freedom and flexibility, and he doesn't. So he sees that as I don't like work a job. And I'm like, but I do. And I do 2 jobs. So I may not get paid for one, but I do 2 jobs on top of my everyday life.
Well, yeah.
And
and that executive director job is not a joke. I mean, I did it for 5 years, and it's like, it is a struggle of constantly. I mean, there's a ton of people underneath of you that you're also having to make sure they're doing their part, because if they're not doing their part, then it just all crumbles. Yeah.
And I feel like lately, like, I got to a point, I think the beginning of, I guess, like, end of last year, I got to a point with being the executive director where I was just like, I don't know if I can do this, because I just don't think I'm capable. Like, I was just like, I felt like I had too much on my plate, and then I was like, but I don't. I can make time for this, because I love deployed love. Like, it is like so special to me, and I'm like, I have to make the effort and time for this. Like, I have to figure out what to give and what not to give. So, like, stepping back from some other things which I'm like totally fine with. I'm learning everybody that I can't say yes to everything. Everyone's been telling me that for years. But I was just like, how do I run this organization and on top of everybody else, and like getting them to do their jobs and things like that on top of my everyday job? And so it took me a while to be like, no, you know what? Like, I think it really does help that like it is so special to us that we want it to continue to grow and bloom. So I definitely, but then like I said, I've seen our counterparts in the industry who are male, and they literally just like, oh, I got this today. And I'm like, how? He goes, oh, I just bumped into somebody. And they're like, hey, how can I offer you?
So hard.
Like, why can't someone do that?
No matter how much training you do, like, to do that position, like, it's not the management position of it that is difficult to me. I didn't think that was. No. It was, how do I even get funding? How do I make people believe that we're worth getting money for? Because that was the biggest thing. I was like, I don't know how, because I feel like our mission itself speaks for itself. I mean, even here on the podcast, things that we do, it has a good reason. And I feel like it's reached a lot of people, and we've had a lot of people over the years that have loved the organization. And it's just crazy, because it's like, how I always felt like, well, I look at all these different people on Facebook groups, and they talk about, oh, well, we have only gotten about $15,000 donated this year. And it's like, we're lucky if we get 4.
And I genuinely would just be happy with, and I think that's the thing, because like, I mean, I was talking to one of our counterparts in Fayetteville, North Carolina, who, because I, was doing networking and things like that. And he's like, yeah, like, I actually just like bumped into someone at the grocery store, and they're like, hey man, like, I, follow you. Like, how can I help you? Like, I want to donate. And I'm just like, that's great. And I'm like, well, we do so much more. So like, why is it because he's just, I don't know, like, it's just so weird, because like, we've talked to our counterparts who are female, and they're doing amazing things in the industry as well. but they're struggling to get financial support as well. Now, thankfully, I feel like one of them just got a break this past year, and I'm really, really excited for her, you know, being named all these different things. I'm so excited that she's getting the recognition that she deserves. Another veteran organization. But I also feel like we're so niche, like, you know, people want to support veterans, but maybe not necessarily the family counterparts. And I think that's where I think we've been struggling with for so long, is like, how do we bring that more to light to those around us that they need just as much support?
Yeah, I agree. So we should definitely, though, since we have Laura on, I was talking about before the show, is I can guarantee as a veteran and your service time that you have definitely dealt with imposter syndrome in that sense way more than most people are aware of happens.
Oh yeah, I almost signed up people. Oh, those are great. Yo, oh my gosh, you see them all the time. Well, that's cool. I was gonna do that, but you know, I don't. They couldn't handle me is a big one that I've heard. I've heard that, or they wouldn't like yelling at me because I would just punch them. Okay, go ahead and punch a girl sergeant. I would pay money to watch this. Like, I feel like the reality show people should make this happen.
Yeah. My younger brother is at Marine boot camp. Well, he just finished Marine boot camp. He's at I don't remember what it's called for Marines, but the equivalent for the infantry training right now. And that was like when he was like looking at going Army Marine, that's what he said. I was like, I don't think you're ready, because he has some anger like management like issues. And I was like, I don't know about this, but like, you know, you can't smart off like you do right now, like you're doing right now, to a drill sergeant. He's like, watch me, they're not going to do anything else. Like, go ahead, I dare you to do it, just so that you can know that your ass is theirs for the next 4 years or however long you want to be in the service, because you won't be doing that. Like, you won't be able to do that. Like, you do that and you're going to be running until you are throwing up and passing out. You're going to be doing
like, not only that, not only like they can't hit you, they're not going to touch you, but they're going to torture you. They're going to be you. The people in your unit are going to be so freaking pissed. Like, they're the ones that are going to beat you up after like training. They're going to be like, are you kidding? You made us do like 10 extra miles because you talked back. Like, you're going to
I hated those people. We all had those people, and like, if they weren't recycled quick enough, they either learned or they got recycled fast, because and the drill instructors didn't have to do anything. We took care of it after, because like you said, we had to do extra crap because you couldn't get your crap together. No, not fun.
Mm-mm. Yep. That's not going to sit. You have to realize,
and, you know, you have to live with these people.
Like, they ain't going to deal with that.
Yeah, just think of us as your brothers and sisters, and we're going to beat you accordingly. Just like your brother and sister would.
We're reading The Women for book club this month. Obviously, when this comes out, it'll have been months ago. But we were talking about it's about veterans in Vietnam, but specifically women. And like how Ashley hasn't gotten to that part, but it's not going to affect the story. But when they come back, that like we're just told they weren't veterans. Like, they would come to like try to go talk to the VA because they're having issues, and they'd be like, oh, honey, this isn't for girls here. We can't have girls in here because this is for veterans. You need to go have your husband come in to talk, not you. And it was just like the crazy, like, oh my God. Like, and then she just, you know, gets to this like thing in her head thinking like, was I a vet? Like, do I not count? Like, who am I then? Because if that's not what I was and that's not what I did, then what did I do when I served for 2 years in Vietnam? Like, what was I doing? And I feel like even now, I'm guessing in your experience from being military, like, do you feel like because you were a female, you were definitely like treated less?
In some aspects, yes. My unit, I was one of 2 females, and it was great because I was always one of the boys growing up anyway. So it kind of, when other people would come into our unit, they'd be like, oh, if they got me to like do whatever was needed. But like within my unit, it was always great because they just saw me as one of the guys, which was nice. I mean, I'm sure all their spouses were like, oh my God, there's a female. Dude, I work with your husband every day. I'm surprised you want to put up with him. Like, that's all I have to say. That is no. your husband's an idiot. I work with him. We're good. Like, I'm happy to send him home to you.
The only time I've ever had an issue with a female being in my husband's unit was when that female was known to be sleeping around with soldiers.
Oh, and 100% there are.
Yeah. And there are those, and unfortunately there are, but I mean, there's guys that do
That's
it too.
That's not in every job.
Yeah, that's any job. Exactly. That's not like it's any different anywhere else. It's not like they're changing in front of each other, things like that. Like it's like, stop. But I don't know where I was going with that.
No, I mean, it happens. Like, we would have like family day events, and like, say we got somebody new in the unit, and their wife was one of those, oh, I'm going to make sure I give you this talk because you're going to be working with my husband type thing.
Gosh, please don't be those. Like, if you're listening to your spouse, just like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, if you're that insecure that your husband's going to cheat, then that is a you problem, not a her problem.
Exactly.
That is you can't have a confidence with your husband not to do something. That is you need to go speak to the chaplain. You need to go to counseling to figure that, or you shouldn't be married. I'm sorry. That is not a her problem. That is a you problem if you're that insecure. And you should not be doing that.
And looking back, like, the ones that I still am friends with, over time, every single one of them whose spouse gave me that speech while we were in, they are no longer together.
Oh, yeah.
Wonder why? Because the second we deployed, what was she doing?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so you're going to accuse him, but it's really you. Got it.
Yeah. And that's like a whole nother topic of like everything we could talk about. Like, I'm sure we could do a whole episode on like
Jody,
on spouses who, and I feel like,
it goes both ways. It definitely happens during deployment.
It definitely happens.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, you have to have a strong relationship. It comes down to communication. We talk about this in a lot of episodes. Communication is key with your soldier and between yourself and your soldier, as well as like, I actually like females in the military unit because they're my go-to for like the good gossip, because for some reason it's not that they know it, but I feel like people just go tell them that because they're females and they just expect
they will tell you.
Wants to know. Yeah. So I feel like, but it's one of those things where, you have to have a good relationship and be secured in your relationship, but because as a military spouse and family, if you're not that way and you're consistently going like through long deployments and training cycles, you have to have that connection. You have to have that security. And, and I feel like that kind of plays in our topic today. Like, like you question that. I've questioned my security with my husband a few times in our 15 years, or we've been together for 18, but we've been married for 14. And I'm always like, he's going to find another girl. Like he's open to this world, and he's going to meet someone else. He's going to fall in love with someone else. And I'm not going to be like that person he wants anymore. Or, he's going to learn. I definitely felt like when we first got married and he went on his first deployment, I definitely felt that he didn't want to be married. Like, and it was just in my brain. It was just like, all of his buddies were single. None of them were married. We got married when he was 21. I was 20. No, 21 and 22. And I was just like, I'm not worthy enough. Like, why am I, I do all these things for you, but like, I don't think that you think it's enough. You want to have this freedom and da-da-da-da. And I feel like a lot of spouses go through that as well. Like, type of thing. Like,
yeah. I mean, imposter syndrome is insecurity. It is just you feeling like not who you are. But that definitely is something, because Dustin, when he deployed, we'd just been married not long. What would it have been? Probably like 6 months maybe when he first deployed. And so, yeah. And you're saying, everybody was young. Everybody was single. Everybody was sleeping around with each other. And so it did come down to a lot of like faith and trust in hope. I don't know. It is just hope, because I don't know. It was such an insecurity. And like, who knows? Because who knows? I mean, just reading this book, like, it happens. And it happens, especially when they were deploying to combat, right? And so, like, who really knows what happened? And I have trust and faith that he didn't cheat on me, but there was a lot going on. And there's a lot of people that, you become more secure with people because they are there and they understand what they're going through. So it does happen on both ends of the spectrum. It's not just the female that's home bored either, too. So
yeah.
And then there's like, okay, so one other time that I can, in Texas, we have, veteran license plates. So Texas goes, I don't know if all states do this, but Texas goes one step up and they actually have a women veterans tag.
Sick. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So my DV tags are the women veteran tags because I really don't even know, I've lost count at this time, how many times that I would, because up until 2 years ago, if you had DV tags, you could park in the handicapped. I've always had my handicapped placard anyway because I've had 3 back surgeries and, I have a heart that likes to turn me into a fainting goat. So I have a handicap tag for a reason. But while the DV law was there, I could park in handicaps even if I forgot to hang up my tag. I would be at, it usually happened at Home Depot or Lowe's. I would park in the DV spot and I would have some grumpy old man come up to me and be like, you shouldn't be using your husband's DV tag like that. I would turn around and be like, well, I guess you should be using your VA benefits to go get glasses because you didn't read my tag, did you? It's
okay,
like,
again,
ugh.
another pet peeve of mine. Fucking mind your own business, people. Like, right? I'm sorry. Like, who cares? Like, there are so many disabilities out there that are not visible
at all.
And it's none of your damn business. If they have a tag, they got it somehow. They got it from their doctor. They got it from somebody who said they needed it. If you have such a problem with someone parking in a space, then you need to go and reflect on your morals, beliefs, whatever it is, because it's none of your business. Like
it'd be one thing if I was parking on the stripes or something totally not in a place. Sure, tell me off. But if I'm parking in a spot and I have literally everything on my vehicle that says that I can park there, fuck off.
Yeah. Like, really, honestly, like, at this point, like, it is, I feel like it's also just, like, such an I hate this because, like, when you have so many people who just find it in their, like, nature or whatever it is that they have to say something. And it's just, like, just go about your business. Like, you have no idea. Like, why? Like, why?
But I'm also not the one. I will embarrass the shit out of them to the point where they're going to question their life choices. Like,
they're not going to make that mistake again.
My God.
And God forbid I have Astrid with me. She's going to probably do it for me. Because my kid,
we talked about today. Like, just just mind your business. Like, it's none of your business. Like, you, like, especially, like, going forward, and we're learning so much more about the effects and the trauma of service members that, beforehand, like, it wasn't like, oh yeah, like, they need that, they need a handicap parking sticker, and there's, like I said, there's so many, there's epilepsy, there's, like you said, you faint, like, there's so many things that, like, if you are walking from a long distance, it's nice to have that, like, space up there. And again, who cares? Like, mind your business.
Congratulations, you told me how you felt, but guess what? Little do you know that it took all my energy to decide to go to Home Depot that day because I was trying to get something that we absolutely needed, and I had to run that errand because...
But, like, the fact that he was just like, you shouldn't be using your husband's, like,
he probably wasn't even a veteran. He probably had
probably not.
Probably not. Like, he probably
not. Because I almost want to guarantee you that person was not a veteran, because if he was a veteran, they would know that there are female service members.
Well,
and yeah, they might be smaller in numbers. I mean, they're smaller in numbers, but I mean, they're still, like, they're still there.
But, like, I've had people when we were in, like, say I was in Navy Federal a couple weeks ago, And this older gentleman walked in and told the two men that were standing at the tellers, thank you for your service and all that, skipped me and went on to the other guy right next to me. And the lady, the teller, who I know, like, in my real life, like, she's one of my friends, she looked at me and she was like, that happens a lot, right? I was like, oh, all the time. I'm just a dumb army wife to them.
And I feel like that's, like, again, like, military spouses, female veterans,
because God forbid me be both.
Yeah. Well, like, just in general, like, and it's so funny because you can kind of, like, if you do something and, like, you shock a male because you're, like, listing off all these things they're doing, like, how do you do those things? It's like, because I have to. Like,
what
God forbid, like, you have to do. Yeah, like, God forbid, like, you have to do all these things. You wouldn't, like, I mean, I've had to have this conversation with my own husband because I'm just like, I think you forget how much I actually do. Like, how much I actually do for the family. I don't just go to the store and pick up groceries. I don't just cook dinner. Like, let me explain everything I do in a day. I wake our kids up and get them ready for school. I feed them. I make sure they have all their things that they need for the day. Take them to school. I come home. I work my 2 jobs. On top of that, clean the house, plan the groceries, pay the bills, make sure our dogs are well taken care of, make sure our appointments are scheduled, make sure, all the things, and then pick the kids up, do any after school activities, clean the house again because we have kids and they make a mess every freaking 20 minutes, cook dinner, get the kids clean, put them to bed, and then probably doing more work at the end of the day. Like, yeah, there's some days where I will go do, like, take time to myself because that's the only time I get to do it. Like, I have to ask for permission to go to ladies' night out. I have to be like, hey, can I go do this? Where you just get up and walk out the door. Like, I don't have that luxury. I mean, I could have that luxury, but I'm not going to do that because I think that's kind of shitty that you're just, not telling your counterpart that you're going to go do something. And that's one of those conversations that we have to have. I'm like, I do a lot of things. This is what you do. Yep, you get up really early in the morning. Sorry, that's you chose to be in the service. So you have to get up early to go to PT. You work during the day, you come home, you nap, you wake up, you eat. Then you're on your phone and then you go to bed. Like, let's compare the things that I do compared to you. And if you had to do these things every single day, I'm not talking about 2 days because I'm out of town. I'm not talking about a week because I'm out of town for work or something like that. If you had to do you honestly think you could manage to do all of these things the way that I'm doing it and not lose your shit too? Because, like, that's one of our biggest things is, like, like, you're always in a bad mood. I'm like, well, let me explain why I'm in a bad mood. Because I am exhausted. But you know what? I'm going to do these things because I love my family. I love my jobs. And, we're going to continue to do things. When people say military spouses are just people, when they're just, because, you hear that and you're just like, well, am I just that? Like, do I not matter? Do I not matter to the military because, I'm just a person? I'm just a number to them. And most times, yes, that's true. Like, we're just a number to the military. We get that. But, at the same time, like, you have so many incredible spouses within your network that your service members wouldn't be who they are without their spouses.
No, we definitely make their service easier for them, because if we were to expect them to be at the same level as we are, like, as far as, like, housekeeping and everything, and on top of the stressors of work, they would have terrible morale. Like, they need to realize that military spouses, we keep the house together so that our husbands come home and can take a nap. They're not having to worry about whether the chores are done or whether the bills are paid, because that stuff's done. It's covered. And that, I do feel like that married military spouses, as long as they're in a good relationship, have better morale because they have something to come home to that is going to help keep everything together, where a lot of single soldiers don't have that, where they're having to do all their things after they get off work as well. So we are part of the military in that sense, that we do help with morale. We do help with, like, allowing them to have the freedom and the space to be well recovered, to be well at work at the right times, and, like, because that doesn't work. Like it's been even dual enrolled, like talking to Lynette a couple of years ago, or whenever we talked to her on the podcast, like how she, she has to like miss work because as a dual enrolled mother, she was the one that was responsible for getting kids to daycare. She is the one responsible for all the household things. And so like our men do kind of have it nice. Yes, I know you have to be at work at 5, but you do come home and take a nap every single day. Like,
well, and I think that's important. Like, you're talking about the dual military, but like, everything like that. Like, not that long ago, me and Jeremy had a conversation because like, he said something and I was just like, we were talking about like all the things I had to like confirm like all the things that I do. And he's like, well, you don't like really like have a career. And I'm like, you're right. I don't have a career. Like, I don't have the career that I want. It's not the career that I wanted. And let me explain why. And going through everything, I was like, Jeremy, do you not like remember me being fired from a job because of your job? Because I was the only one who took off when our child was sick. I was the only one who can take him to his doctor's appointments. I was the only one who can do all of these things. And they decided that, hey, we can't keep like having this, like, I'm sorry, we're gonna have to let you go. And I was like, not because of my work ethic, is because I was the person that had to continuously take off because our child had strep. Our child had when Devin was really little, he constantly had like ear infections and he had to get his tonsils taken out. And so, but I was one that had to constantly take off. And so it was one of those things where I was just like it wasn't because of my work ethic, because I'm a very like, when I take a job, I do it. Like I do it with whatever I can, whether it's a job that I have no idea what I'm doing, I learn really quick, or it's whatever it is. And so, it's not like I can, go chase after my dream job because I don't want to do that, because I know that I'm that primary parent to our kids for as long as you're in the service, meaning I have to be the one that gets our kids to and from school. If I worked a 9 to 7 or 9 to 6 job, I'm the one that would have to figure out where our kids go after school. I'm the one that has to make all these arrangements. We're going on vacation in a week, and I'm the one that has to make the arrangements for the dogs. Like, not once has he been like, hey, I'll find a dog sitter. Not once has he goes, hey, I'll find a sitter for date night. Or, hey, I have to go out of town this upcoming weekend. I know you're busy. I'll call mom and see if she can come up and hang out with the kids so you don't have to cancel your plans. It's me. And I'm just like, that is such a big thing. And I think and I feel like no matter where we get it in society with like women becoming more and more like, equal rights and things like that, there's always going to be that, like, we're the primary parent. We're the ones that are going to take care of things because we have to. Like, if we don't do it, it's not going to get done, or it's not going to get done in a way that like we need it to get done. So we just kind of always take that role and just get things.
I think it surprised my husband's unit when, like, I didn't ask him to do any of this, obviously, because, again, he's in the military still. So I get, especially being a veteran, like, hey, your job, you got crap to do. Cool. So when Astrid had her surgery and he's like, oh yeah, I told them I'm off. I was kind of like, huh? What? No. I was like, well, I mean, yeah, it is a serious surgery. She's going to have to be in the hospital for several days. He was like, yeah, if it was something like, oh, she was just getting a scope, probably not, because, you've done 100 of those but like, this is a 4-hour surgery. Things could go wrong. There might be things we need to make decisions on. And I was just like, my ex would have never done that. And it's his kid. I mean, I still, to this day, it's still his kid. And yeah, no, I mean, my kids choose almost all the time to stay here because they see that Brian doesn't make me do, I don't have to take everything on. Sometimes it's Brian that takes them to karate or, to my son's in ABA therapy. And so, Brian picks them up or takes them, just to help me out because I literally am pulled in 3 different directions from all 3 kids. And so it's like, I hear you because I've had that spouse, but also it is totally, you just are like, huh? when
Well, and
you have
I
one
should
that,
preface and say Jeremy
well,
is
no,
great.
and I
Like
get what you're saying.
I'm knocking on my husband just because like I feel like I think he gets so stuck in like his work mode that he forgets that he has a home mode that he has to come into. And so there's a lot of times where I feel like we're never out of that mode. Like we never turn off work and home mode. It's always just both are on for women. Men,
Oh, I
I
would
think,
love
have
for us all to have to flip. It would be great.
to flip it. It would be wonderful. I think like with Jeremy specifically, and we've talked about this so many times over the 18 years we've been together, but specifically the 14 years he's been in service, is that like he has a very hard time switching that off in terms of like how he like communicates. And like Jeremy's already such an introvert, and we've talked about this on the podcast that like he's not a big talker, and I could talk all day long, we all know this. And it's one of those things where I'm just like, but you have to come home and engage with me. Like you have to, like, I know you want to just switch it off and not do anything because you've just been talking to a bunch of people all day long, but that is not how it works. And then I was like, specifically here, because I'm like, I know one other person here. Like I hang out with one person here in our new place. I was like, you're my only other person, like adult, that I have interaction with. I was like, if you don't start talking to me, we're gonna go in the boxing ring, because I need you to be like, just, I know you've been dealing with college kids all day long, whatever it is, but you just can't turn everything off. Like you have to come home and be in dad mode. So like today I was just like, hey, I have a really busy day. The kids are home. I don't have time to take them to go do anything today. I was like, you're working a half day today. I was like, when you get home, can you go take him to do something? He's like, yeah, absolutely, not a problem. I was like, great. But like Jeremy's awesome mentality with him is like, he'll do whatever I ask him to do. Like if I ask him to do something, he'll do it. I just had to learn that that's just how he works. And I hated that because I'm just like, you see that there's dishes. You see that the kids are fighting and I'm trying to get something done. Like you would think that you would just be like, hey, like, let me solve this. It's not until I say, hey, can you do something about this, that he's like, oh yeah, maybe I should do something about that. But I feel like that's just his like personality.
His brain is still on work, not that.
Yeah, he's and that's just something I've personally had to learn over the years. And once I learned that, and once I got like past that point of like I shouldn't have to ask you to help take care of the house and things like that. Once I did that, I was like, fine, that's fine. Like if I'm feeling overwhelmed, if I just go say, hey, can you do this, this, and this? He's like, absolutely. He gets it done. And then I don't feel bad about it. And I've learned that I shouldn't feel bad about asking my partner to do things. And that was just something that I had to grow and learn that that's okay. Like some people, that's how they operate. I don't operate that way, but I had to learn that how I operate isn't how someone else operates. And so eventually, and I feel like that helped a lot of my, like, am I being a good wife? Am I being a good mother? Like, type of thing, because I was constantly like, I'm not good enough. I'm, constantly like, I feel like I'm constantly yelling at my kids. Like, are they going to remember that? Are they going to remember all these things moving forward? And then it's nice to have like those little, like, it's okay to fail. Like, it's okay to have a bad day. Like, it's okay to have a bad day. Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, move on with the day. And I think that's really important when it comes to that imposter syndrome, is that it's okay to not feel like you're doing your best.
Yeah.
But if you just remember that, hey, everyone's going through it. Like everybody, has gone through a point in their life where they don't feel like they're good enough. They don't feel like what they're doing matters, to a point where they should like continue to do that job or continue to do whatever it is. Every person goes through that. And if you just remember, A, you're not alone. And B, if you just kind of like take a deep breath, reset, and refocus, you might find that you are amazing at what you're doing, and you continue to do that and have that, love come your way.
I think when it comes to, if you go back around to it all, is like, it is insecurity. And I mean, I even have it in my art, and I have it in like the whole writing a book. I don't know how many times we'll say that, but I want to write a book, but I will never do it. But I think that's because I am so insecure that like, why do I think I should write a book? Like how do I have the capacity to do that? Like what makes me think I could do that? And I think that is imposter syndrome too. And it all comes around to just like being insecure and having to realize that don't look at what other people are doing. Who cares? Like, write a book, and if it flops, who cares? Like, you wrote a book. That's cool. That's an accomplishment.
I think as long as it makes you happy, like if it makes you feel good inside, makes you feel happy, who cares what other people think? And I feel like, especially like with American society, we are so stuck on what other people think of what we do, how we look, how we talk, how we, act, whether it's on in person or on social media, that, that's just kind of instilled in our brain. And I feel like that's where a lot of our consciousness comes from, because we're like, what if it flops? Like, what if someone doesn't like it and they leave a bad review and da da da. And I think like with like specifically with the coaster, like anytime we get a bad review, like I get so nervous about reading it. And then like this year I'm just like, let's see what someone's going to complain about now, because like we know the product that we have, we know our customer service, we know what we put out to our guests, so we know that we're top notch. Like we know that, like, we get so many comments and reviews saying like the best facility, the friendliest staff, da 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 da. And I'm just like, I laugh when people complain about like the dumbest stuff. Like there was a long line. Well, yeah, because it like had lightning for 35 minutes. Do you want to go ride on a coaster with lightning? Be my fucking guest. Like I'm like, it blows my mind on what people will go out. Like it comes back to like, talking to like you, Laura, about the veteran spot. Like it blows my mind. And I've learned over the last 2 years, just being like back into customer service with the coaster and stuff. Like it's been 4 years, but like specifically the last 2 years, because of like back after COVID and stuff, that you're never going to make everyone happy. There's always going to be a negative Nancy. There's always going to be that Karen. There's always going to be someone who just will say the nastiest things about anything just because they can, just because they have something stuck up their butt and they are just going to be that person for the day. I saw something this morning on TikTok about a person that was just like, I was just like, wow, like that was so far left field. Why did you spend the 5 minutes to type this paragraph up on a missing apostrophe? Like, I'm not even kidding, a missing apostrophe in a comment. And I was just like, wow, like what crawled up her butt? Like I was like, I cannot believe this. And so I feel like having that mindset of like, as long as it makes you happy, as long as what you do is making you happy, making those around you happy, that's all that matters.
Yeah, I think comparison and social media is destroying like the way we run and like everything about like why like our securities, because comparison is so hard and you can't avoid it, especially if you want it for inspiration. Like social media is great for inspiration, but it also is putting yourself into this like, oh, but am I as good as this person? Do I look like this person? Can I do as many things as this person? And it's just awful, the comparison, and it causes so much insecurity too. It's just sad.
Yeah.
So at the brewery, I named all the beers something military related. So they were hilarious. I would like, our seltzer was Jody juice because it was hilarious, because mainly women drank it. And there were so many flavors of it. So I named it Jody juice. It was hilarious. Everybody loved it. There was one that was just like a one-off beer. I only made it once because it was seasonal, and I named it Barracks Bunny. It was hilarious. Somebody on social media made it go viral on Instagram. Like, oh my God, I can't believe they named it Barracks Bunny. Like, how rude, blah, blah, blah. It went
I guarantee you that person wasn't military. I guarantee you that person.
They weren't. They weren't. Yeah. So people were like, you realize that it was a female who owns this business. Like, a female made the name. It's hilarious. Like, let her be. We made stickers.
Yeah.
You're like, we're just gonna run with it. Thanks for the marketing.
And you're like,
thanks for that.
I wasn't gonna make it that, but now we're gonna go.
No, we're not. I will say, like, the one word that's always irked me, and I think, and it doesn't irk me anymore now, I think it's hilarious, is the dependopotamus. Like, where, because like it just encompassing like all military spouses, like, you know, all military spouses are, you know, gold diggers, which is such a funny thing for people to say because we make
What money?
nothing.
Yeah.
What money? You know, they're only in it for the insurance, or they're, you know, whatever the stigma is. And I used to hate that word, like, as a young military spouse, because, like, especially for a spouse who wants to help other spouses, and like that really falls in like, oh, she's wearing her husband's ring, or oh, she's whatever kind of thing. And I was just like, no, that's not what I'm doing. But like, you know, but now that I've grown older and I've like kind of gotten out of that mindset of like being kind of like triggered by that word, that I think it's hilarious now. And I'm just like, I mean, call me
But
a
there's
dependent upon
definitely
this
some
all
of those
you
people
want.
that pick the word.
There's 100%, like, there are spouses out there that like do put that stigma, but like in general, most military spouses just want to survive the fucking day. We just want to make it through the day, whether our spouse is home, our spouse is not home. We just, I mean, the shit that is thrown our ways. Like, I was talking to my friend who's nowhere near military, like, affiliated. No one in her family is military. And we were talking about like all the things that have happened to me specifically in the last 4 years. Well, just through the last 4 years, all the rapid deployments, all that kind of stuff. And she's just like, how do you do it? I was like, I don't know. We just do it because we don't have a choice. Like, we don't have a choice to say, you're leaving in 2 hours. Like, I'm going to stop my foot. I'm going to march in there and tell your commander that that's not fucking happening. Like, that's not, like, if you are that spouse, don't do that, because they don't have a choice. And all you're going to do is just cause your spouse, your significant other, just more issues that they don't need, especially in like those type of scenarios. And I've met some of those spouses who are 100%, like, I've met the spouse who like thinks she wears her husband ring and things like that. And like, I'm not a person where I'm like, no, like, we're not doing that. Like, I do remember as a younger spouse, like, staying in my lane. But then, like, as I grew up, I told my husband, like, I don't care what rank their husband is. I was like, if they're a command sergeant major, I'm still going to be friend. Like, if I enjoy talking to their spouse, if I enjoy, or we have things in common, I'm going to have a relationship with them. Now, I personally know that there's only certain things that I can tell that spouse. There's only certain things that I can complain to that spouse about. But at the same time, like, our relationship isn't based off of our husband's jobs. Like, our relationship is because we're two human beings who need support, and we somehow connected. And I think that's important to remember, that, you know, you have just as much right to make connections in the military, whether they're through your husband's unit, outside your husband's, or your, I keep saying husband, but, you know, significant other's job. That, you know, but don't be that person where like, well, my husband's a lieutenant and you can't sit with us. Like, don't be that person. Like, we've moved past that. We're no longer there.
I kind of wonder if that stigma has kind of gone away in the newer military anyways, because my book club that I hang out with, and obviously we're not enlisted anymore, but I am also like 10 years older than most of the girls in my book club. And there doesn't seem to be like that where they're like worried about what my husband's rank is, or like how, if us being something older is an issue. And I just don't think people talk about rank anymore. I feel like it just doesn't come up unless you personally know them, like through the FRG, and you may know that. But I still, even when I was in, we kind of just, as spouses, it wasn't my rank. And as long as we're, like you were saying, being very respectful of like, hey, don't bitch about the commander to the commander's wife. Like, that's stupid. Don't do that kind of thing. Right. Like, then.
Well, I always thought it funny because like the commander's wife would, like, at least one commander's wife for me, like, would always bitch about her husband. I was like, you should go tell him, like, to like knock it off. And she's like, oh, I've already told him, and he knows that if he doesn't stop doing this, like, it's not gonna be fun for him at home. But like, it's one of those things where, you know, it's not a big thing right now. There are those select few who do come through it, and it's just like all this kind of stuff. And like, and to be completely honest, and if you're one of those spouses who come in and just kind of take charge in the terms of like, well, my husband's the general, or whatever their rank is, you're not going to have any solid friendships. You're not going to have that true support, that second family that the military life can provide you. If you're going to come in and just be like, grr, like, just don't do it. But I feel like a lot of those military stigmas, other than like the gossiping one, which I feel like is just fire fed through social media is really the only big one, like, I feel like we kind of deal with nowadays. Well, that and like young spouses sleeping around, but that goes both ways. But I feel like that's just,
That's
again,
life, though. Like, I feel like a
that's
lot
life.
of young
Yeah.
couples in the whole world, like, that just
Yeah.
is life.
Well, it is. And I feel like a lot of young couple, I mean, and that's the thing about military life is it's full of young people. Like, majority of the service members are those ages between 18 and 25, especially in those like MOSs, like infantry and stuff like that, where, you know, they get married because they want their girlfriend to come along with them. And like, it might have not been right for them. And you have, you know, people who've never dealt with the military, and military life is hard, y'all. Like, it's not for the faint of heart. It's not for those, you know, if you're a significant other who's never left their hometown, that can cause a lot of strife, that can cause a lot of heartache, that can cause a lot of, you know, doubt whether or not you can continue to be a military spouse, but whether you can continue to be a spouse, because you're moved away from all of your family and friends. Yeah. You know,
Everything is a question mark. Write it in pencil because it's going to get erased.
Everything.
Anything about military life is a question mark. Like, exactly. Like, don't ever put anything in stone.
So
Like,
anybody who's been listening to the show for the last like 6 months knows that my life is a big question mark, and it still is. Like, how do we not have answers? I don't know. It's the government. Like,
well, and that's the thing is like, if you are someone who, if you're a girlfriend or a fiance or someone who, or even just a new spouse, just know that like, you have to have that flexibility. You have to have that grace of like, do you think your husband wants to go to the field for 2 weeks? Probably not. Maybe, you know, now, like, I would say, like, be mad at your husband if he doesn't tell you he's going to the field. 100% lay into him on that one. I remember when Jeremy, I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, where I'm like, hey, what time are you going to be home for dinner? Thursday, and it's Monday. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, sir, you never once mentioned you're going to be in the field the whole week. He goes, yeah, I did. I was like, when? Because I write it down when I know you're going to be in the field.
There's also maybe a more than once conversation. That's like, don't just say that when we're going to sleep. Like, that's a, hey, just like, a reminder.
Yeah, I was like, going back to our text messages, like, not in a text, because typically I have him send me dates in my text messages, so that way, like, if I can't physically go write it down right then and there, because we all know my memory is like shit. Like, I have like the worst memory. I've, you know, if you tell me something and I'm in the middle of doing dishes, I'm not going to remember it. Like, write it on my calendar, text it to me so I can go back and put it on my calendar. Because if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist, y'all. And so, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, you have to have grace. And you have to grace with yourself. Like, if you feel like you're not worthy enough, have grace with yourself. Like,
or step back. My thing is, like, I know when I start to feel really insecure, step back from social media. Stop comparing. Yeah. Stop worrying about what other people are doing. Stop thinking about, like, even it applies to anything. I mean, management, CEO, like, who cares what those other people are doing? Good for them. Congratulations. But, like, what you're doing is still working. Obviously, it's still a thing, and you don't need to compare yourself. Just, like, do what works for you. Like you were saying, what makes you happy? That's what matters. Yeah. In the long run, none of it matters. We all die. So, like, do things that make you happy and stop caring.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and, like, even if, like, you have someone underneath you, like, you know, we had a volunteer underneath me who just went against everything I said. And it really brought me down for a really long time. And I finally was just like, I don't care. I don't care what she thinks of me anymore. I don't care. You know, she's not doing what she's doing. I am doing what I feel is important and necessary for the organization. And I feel like that's, like, as long as you feel like what you're doing is important, it probably is. Like, and you just have to kind of move on with your day and your life. And like you said, take a step back if you need to.
I will say that, like, all the what ifs and question marks and all that stuff that we get over time, when a curveball comes our way, we're just like, okay, cool. Because, like, example, last year, my husband had a family member pass away, and, like, we needed to get to his family's house. Like, okay, in the next, like, 4 hours, we need to be on the road. And he originally, like, in his mind, I guess, while he was talking to his dad, he was like, okay, well, she's got all that. I'm going to have to drive by myself. And he told me, and then went back to talking to his dad. Within the like 15 minutes that he was still talking, I left the room, called my best friend. She was already on her way to pick up my kids for the 4 days that they had left of school, and then their dad would pick them up from them on Friday. And like, he got off the phone and he was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, Mia's going to be here in like 5 minutes to take the kids for 4 days until their dad takes them, because, you know, spring break's next week and it's his weekend, or it's his spring break. So I'm packing for Mia's house for them, and then
let's go.
We need to pack because you said we need to be on the road in 4 hours. Like, can you get our suitcase?" And he was just like, "Wait, you did that all in 15?"
I
Yeah,
do agree.
years
You
of
can do
practice.
anything.
Years
That's-
of practice.
Yeah, that's the cool part of the resiliency that we get with military spouses. Like, I don't want to be resilient. I don't want to be strong, but we do have it because, yeah, like whatever the question mark in my life is right now, either way, like it's gonna suck. I know it's gonna suck, but like, oh well, like that's what's gonna happen, and that's what's gonna happen, and then we'll deal with it, and we'll move on, and we'll make the best of it, right? Like either way, whatever happens, we're like, okay, well, this is what we're doing, and then we're gung ho into that next thing.
I always joke with like my non-military friends that I'm like, you know, if the world comes to a crashing halt, some type of apocalypse or something like that, like find yourself a military spouse, because they're going to be able to like, they're going to be able to at least like function and have somewhat of a plan, or start formulating a plan, because we have done it for so long that like it's just going to come so naturally to anyone who is like in that scenario. Like, you know, we have to go from like 0 to like 160 in a split second. We have to game plan, like, you know, especially like I think with, especially with those like rapid deployments, like I've never experienced any of those. Like, you know, none of us who went through those had experienced those experiences in so long. And so when those came down the pipeline, we're just like the first one, we were like, what do we do? Like, it was literally like we stood there for a second, we're like, what do we do? Like, we don't, like, you have to be at work and reported in 2 hours. Of course, like my husband was at the rank where he was like gone in 30 minutes every single time. But it was one of those things where like, what do we do? And then like when the third one happened, and then the fourth one, and then the like so forth down the line happened, like we were like, oh, another green Corvette, we got this. Like, yeah, I'll run home and wash your laundry and have it back to you in 20 minutes, like whatever it might be. You know, it is what it is. And military spouses, that's one of the great things about it. Like, even if you feel like you're not doing everything right, when those incidents come down and you get the shit handled, at least let that be validation to you that you can handle anything thrown your way. And it might suck, because it will suck. We all know that. Like, it's not easy.
You
Like,
have to embrace the suck.
you have to embrace the suck. And you know, if you're watching shows about military life and things like that, like glamour, like, you know, make it seem so cool and so great, there are great moments. Don't let me say that. Like, there are great moments. Like, I wouldn't trade this life for anything. I enjoy all the people. Like, I love all the people we've met. I've loved all the places that we've gotten to go to. I've loved the experiences that we've dealt with, on top of all the suck. Like, it really is. But it takes a special person. It takes a certain like heart to kind of like really enjoy that experience, and it's not meant for everyone, and that's okay. Like, if you're a spouse and you're like, this is just not the life for me, that's okay. Like, it's not an easy life. It's hard, it's lonely, it's chaotic, it's all the things. And it's definitely going to be one of those things where, you know, there's the good and the bad.
Yeah. That's why we're here. This is why we have the podcast. So you guys know you're not alone. Like, you can hear our stories. Like, we've all dealt with every topic that we've had. We've all have some story and some experience with it. So like, you're not alone, and we all do it.
Yeah.
So thanks for hanging out with us. A good episode, and we will be back again, of course, in 2 weeks. And we are glad to have all of the people that are hanging out with us. We've been growing a lot on social media, and it's really been fun, because we have some people that now I see their name and I'm like, oh, look, it's this person that always comments, or this person that always likes. So that's been really fun to see, like, oh, there are people that love the show. So thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you guys in 2 weeks. And like we like to say, Ruck up, Buttercup.